and welcome to our presentation on how to use the library sewing machines. In this video, you will get an overview of the important parts of the sewing machine and also learn how to wind a bobbin, thread the sewing machine, and sew using a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch. Let's take a look at some of the parts of this machine. These parts and more are identified in illustrations in the sewing machine manual, which will be kept in a binder kept with the sewing machines at the library. This is the presser foot. It holds the fabric while you sew. It is raised and lowered using the presser foot lifter, which is a lever on the back side of the machine. This particular foot is good for most of your sewing needs, but sometimes, like when you are putting in a zipper, you will need a different presser foot. Here we have the needle and needle clamp. We have needles for average weight fabrics on the machine, but if you plan to sew on heavy or very light fabric, you may need to change out the needle. Needles also need to be replaced when they are damaged, like this bent needle. To replace a needle, the little screw clamp is loosened to release the old needle for removal and tightened after inserting the new needle. Needles go in with the flat side of the needle facing to the rear. This screw clamp has a little notch in it, so if it is too tight to loosen by hand, you can use a small screwdriver in the notch to help turn it. The feed dogs, those little jagged bars underneath the presser foot that move the fabric from the front of the machine toward the back as you are sewing. When you press the reverse lever, the feed dogs move in the opposite direction, so you are stitching in reverse. A bobbin holds the lower thread for sewing. There's a clear bobbin cover over it. On the top of the machine, the horizontal spool pin holds the spool for the upper thread. The bobbin winding spindle is only used when winding thread onto a bobbin. You'll see some thread guides which hold the thread on the correct path from the spool to the needle. Now let's take a look at all the dials on the front of the machine. On the far left is the thread tension dial, which is used to adjust the top thread tension on the machine. We will discuss how to check for balanced stitchings and adjust the tension later. Next is the 3 needle position dial. Most of the time you will want to keep the needle centered, but if it's needed to be over to the left or right side for a special purpose, you can move it there using this 3 position dial. When your sewing session is over, please set the needle back to the center position. The stitch width dial is on the far right. When sewing anything but straight stitches, this allows you to select how wide the stitch pattern will be. Keep the width at 0 for straight stitching. Looking at the front of the machine, the stitch length dial allows you to adjust the length of your stitches. The larger the number, the longer the stitches. Generally, on heavier fabrics, you want to use a longer stitch length than on fine fabrics. For most sewing, keep it between 2 and 3. The pattern selector dial allows you to set the stitch pattern to sew with. The reverse sewing lever moves the feed dogs in the opposite direction, thus sewing in reverse. When sewing anything that might get some stress on the stitching, it's a good idea to sew a couple stitches in reverse to lock your seam at the ends, helping prevent it from coming apart. The power button on the right side turns the machine off and on. For safety, turn the machine off when you are threading or cleaning it. The hand wheel is used to raise or lower the needle. Always turn the top of the wheel toward you. The power cord and the foot pedal. The foot pedal operates much like the gas pedal on your car. The harder you step on it, the faster you go. So those are the basic parts. If you find that something is broken or not working properly on one of our sewing machines, please notify library staff. This sewing machine uses class 15 plastic bobbins. Please do not put other style bobbins in this machine. The library will have some empty bobbins available for use on a first-come, first-served basis, but you cannot take our bobbins home with you. If you want to keep a bobbin of thread for future use, please bring your own bobbin to wind. To wind the bobbin, insert the spool of thread onto the spool pin. This is done by sliding off the spool holder, sliding the spool onto the pin, and then replacing the spool holder. Take the loose end of the thread and bring it to the left. Notice that there are some directions on top of the machine. These will help show you where to bring the thread. First, snap the thread into the thread guide. Next, wind the thread clockwise around the bobbin winder tension discs. Then thread the empty bobbin by bringing the tail under the thread through the hole in the top of the bobbin, passing the thread from the inside to the outside. Place the threaded bobbin onto the bobbin spindle. Push the bobbin spindle to the right. When the bobbin spindle is pushed to the right, the machine is in bobbin winding mode, which prevents the machine from doing any stitches when you step on the foot pedal. While holding the thread's tail end securely, step on the foot control pedal. Once the bobbin is spun around several times, pause and cut off the tail end close to the bobbin. Then continue winding until the bobbin is full or has enough thread on it for your purpose. Cut the thread, push the bobbin spindle to the left, and remove the bobbin. Now let's start threading the sewing machine. It is always safest to have the machine turned off when you are threading it. If the needle is not already at its highest point, use the hand wheel, turning it counterclockwise to bring the needle up. Always turn the hand wheel counterclockwise, turning the top of the wheel towards you. Turn just a bit more until the needle just slightly begins to go back down. Raise the presser foot to release the tension discs. Remove the spool holder from the spool pin. Place your spool of thread on the spool pin and replace the spool holder up against the spool. For very small spools, place the small side of the spool holder next to the spool. Otherwise, the large end goes closest. Draw thread from the spool through the upper thread guide over on the left and bring the thread through pre-tension spring. These machines have directions printed on them showing the path to follow with the thread. Thread the tension module by leading the thread down the right side channel. It is helpful to hold the thread down between the spool and the thread guide during this part to seat the thread between the tension discs. Bring the thread back up and pass the thread from right to left through the slotted eye of the take-up lever and then downwards again. Bring the thread behind the horizontal thread guide and then behind the thin wire needle clamp guide and finally down to the needle, which gets threaded from front to back. Bring the thread down under the presser foot and pull out about 6 to 8 inches of thread to the rear or left side of the machine. When inserting or removing the bobbin, always raise the presser foot and make sure the needle is fully raised. Remove the clear bobbin cover by sliding the small tab next to it to the right to release it. Look at the illustration on the bobbin cover. It shows which way the thread should be coming off the bobbin. Hold your bobbin with the thread coming off in that same direction and insert it into the bobbin case. While holding the bobbin in place with your finger, bring the thread around until it slips into the notch. Let go of the bobbin and hold the tail end of the upper thread of the machine with the needle threaded. Turn the hand wheel toward you until the needle has gone all the way down and returned back up. Draw the top thread out to the back or side, and it will bring the bobbin thread up through the needle plate. Bring both top and bottom thread ends to the back of the machine under the presser foot. Your machine is now ready to use. Once you have both the top and bottom threaded, you're ready to start sewing. For straight stitching, set the pattern selector dial to straight stitching. Set the stitch width to 0. Set your stitch length between 2 and 3 for most sewing. Before you begin sewing on your good fabric, it's a good idea to test your stitches on a piece of scrap material. To sew, use the hand wheel to raise the needle to its highest position. Have the presser foot in the raised position with about 6 inches of both upper and lower thread passing under it toward the back of the machine. Position your fabric under the presser foot and gently lower the foot. Make sure your power is on, then step on the foot pedal to start sewing. Guide the fabric as it feeds under the presser foot. Do not push or pull the fabric, let the machine move it. You're just steering it. To check your stitches for balance, take your sample piece of fabric out of the machine after you've sewn a straight line. Look at your stitching to see if the top side and the bottom look about the same. That is a balanced stitch. If the top thread looks like it's pulled tight instead of going down into the fabric, your top tension is too tight, so try loosening it using the thread tension dial and sew another sample line. It may take a few tries before you get it right. On the other hand, if the top thread is forming loops under the fabric, or the bottom thread looks like it's just a straight line not going into the fabric at all, the top tension may be too loose. Tighten it up a little at a time and see if it helps. If you can't get the stitches balanced, check to make sure the machine has been threaded correctly on both the top and the bottom. Are you sure you had the presser foot up when threading the machine and down when sewing? Because those will cause problems with your stitching. For a zigzag stitch, set the pattern selector dial to the zigzag setting. Set the desired stitch width, keeping in mind that the larger the setting number is, the wider the stitch will be. Set your desired stitch length. The larger the number, the longer the stitches. So if you want a dense zigzag pattern, set the length to a smaller number. Before you begin sewing on your good fabric, it's a good idea to test your stitches on a piece of scrap material to see if the settings are where you want them. The sewing machines can do more than just these 2 stitch patterns, but for beginner sewing, this is all you will need. We always have a copy of the manual kept with the sewing machines that you can refer to for other stitch patterns that you may want to use as you try more challenging projects. If you have never sewn before and would like some beginner lessons that include simple sewing projects, look for sewing classes in our online calendar and sign up. That's the end of this video. Thank you for watching.